Front seven you don't want to mess with. That's today's draft. Myles, you have the first pick.
Well, I would go with the San Francisco 49ers because, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, they've got a bunch of ass kickers on that defense. And even with Nick Bosa, going through the holdout right now, I expect that to be resolved sooner than later. And when you've got a team that's got Nick Bosa and Fred Warner leading your front seven, that's a damn good front seven. And that's one I don't want to mess with. And they go out and they get Javon Hargrave too. That's something that's really, really interesting that maybe is a little bit underrated there. Even though they lose D'Amico Ryans from coordinating that defense, they go out and they get Steve Wilkes, a guy who knows how to use those four-man fronts and be really aggressive. I don't think that the 49ers are going to take much of a step back, if any step back at all defensively, and that's in large part due to that awesome front seven that they've got.
Now, point of clarification, are we talking about we don't want to mess with them and that we don't want to have to block them? Or are we talking about don't want to mess with them and that we don't want to have to fight them? Is it either? Is it both? Is it neither? I guess it can be both. All right, why not both?
I feel like it's both, right? If you don't want to block them, then you also don't want to fight them. I don't really want to fight Nick Bosa unless I'm in Montgomery.
And this thing about the 49ers, John Lynch, I believe, has an innate skill of finding guys who play the way he played. He sees something in them that reminds him of himself, whether it's George Kittle on the offensive side of the ball or any of the defensive players, that no hesitation, run through the brick wall, even knowing that the brick wall sometimes might win. These guys roll out of bed and kick your ass. And you're right, the 49ers, a great choice by you. I'm going to go with the team up the road from me, the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially because I wouldn't want to mess with Cam Hayward, regardless of whoever else is around, like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. But you look at those guys and traditionally what the strength of that team has been, and I think if that team's going to be successful this year, we talk so much about the offense and can the line hold up and can Kenny Pickett get the ball to George Pickens and what can Najee Harris do? That's all well and good. But that team is only going to thrive in a highly competitive AFC North and AFC generally if that defense can slow down some of the great offenses. And that means get pressure on the quarterback. That means keep TJ Watt healthy and let him go do his thing. When he's healthy, the Steelers' defense is one of the very best in the entire NFL. I would not want to mess with those guys anytime, any place, anywhere.
Certainly not. I wouldn't either. And, you don't count Minkah Fitzpatrick as a part of the front seven, really. But sometimes you kind of can, just given the fact that, really it's almost front sixes now are your base defense, and the way that Fitzpatrick can go up and he can go back and he can play different spots. Like, I almost count him as a part of that, even though he's technically a safety, because of all the great things he can do. So, that's a defense generally that I would not want to mess with. But you left one on the board. Not that the Steelers were a bad pick, but this pick is the one that I would absolutely want next. That's the Philadelphia Eagles, man. You just kind of mentioned them at the top there with how well they do when it comes to that front and rotating guys in and out, keeping guys fresh. You've got the elder statesmen of Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. They're still there. You got Hassan Reddick. He had a great year last year. You had Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter up the middle. You get those dudes in the mix. I don't want to fight those guys. I don't want to block those guys. We know how effective they can be. And they've got a new defensive coordinator in Sean Desai, but I think that they still are going to be one of those really, really productive units.
And look, that would have been my next pick. And you look at that depth chart, it really is jarring when you see all those names and the guys who are second string, and they keep bringing them in, they keep them fresh. And by the time, the game wears on and those offensive linemen are worn out, they're still ready to go. And they just keep plugging them in and they get it done. I'll go now with a team that we focus on very much as it relates to the offense, the Miami Dolphins. That defense has the potential, even with the Jalen Ramsey injury. That front seven, especially with Vic Fangio there, getting them stirred up and getting them schemed up. Christian Wilkins, Jalen Phillips, if he can fulfill his full potential. Bradley Chubb, good Lord, and all the other guys they have. That defense could be, much, much better than we give it credit for, especially with Fangio there now taking over And balance is what we're looking for in the NFL. And the Dolphins could end up being one of the most balanced teams this year, even with that great offense. That defense steps up, and the Dolphins are going to be a force to be reckoned with. So, no, I don't want to mess with the Miami Dolphins front seven.
I wouldn't either. And I think that you're onto something with Vic Fangio going to that team and going to that defense, because look, that's a coordinator upgrade that really is significant. I look at there for the Dolphins, I look to the Vikings where you get Brian Flores in there. The Browns, as we were mentioning in the last segment, you get Jim Schwartz. Like, those are significant coordinator upgrades that could really make a difference just based on what the scheme is and utilizing the personnel that you have to the best of your ability. So that's one where I look at it and I agree with you there. I'm going to go on this next one with one that's kind of dominated by one player, and it's the Cowboys. Because look, when you've got a Micah Parsons running kind of your defense and being this guy that is as good as he is, that makes the front seven so much better around him. And I say that with apologies to Aaron Donald, who is somebody that I have been around and is technically in the same county as me. And, I wouldn't necessarily want to run into him right now after I say something like this. But look, if you've got Micah Parsons and you also have DeMarcus Lawrence, that to me really elevates this to where the Cowboys can be one of those teams where you're kind of afraid of the front seven and you don't necessarily want to mess with them.
When you started down that path, I thought you were going Rams. One guy leads the way. And I don't care who else is around for the Rams. As long as Aaron Donald is there, I don't want to mess with those guys. Even if the other six consist of a group that would count me and you. Even if it's me and you, I don't want to mess with that front seven because I got to get through Aaron Donald. I'm going to go in a different direction, though, since we've already talked about that. How about the Ravens? Not because of any one specific player. There is no Terrell Suggs. There is no Ray Lewis. There is no Peter Boulware. But each and every year, by the time we get to December, even if we think, the Ravens defense is down, the Ravens defense isn't what it's been in the past, by the end of December, the Ravens defense is pretty damn good. They're pretty good. They'll kick your ass. There's just that mentality. It's just part of putting on that helmet and that uniform. You transform into somebody that no one wants to mess with. The Ravens are the personification of that. They've got that history, that tradition, and John Harbaugh knows how to coach it into whoever his guys are in any given year. And it helps to have Roquan Smith, who got a huge contract and earned every penny of it, and Patrick Queen, who's now trying to get his own from the Ravens or somewhere else. But there's just something about that Ravens defense that no matter what they look like on paper, they will kick your ass.
Yeah, Mike McDonald did a good job with that group last year. And yeah, I don't think that that's going to be any different. It just is kind of baked into their DNA. Honestly, you could say a couple of the other NFC North teams too. I mean, the Bengals, with what they've got up front, Trey Hendrickson, they just gave linebacker a new contract. So it's not like they're slouches up front with Lou Anarumo coordinating that defense. The Browns have a good front four. I don't necessarily know about the linebackers behind them, but Myles Garrett, you had Zadarius Smith to that. They just signed Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson. Like that's another front where it's like, I don't really want to mess with anybody that looks like Myles Garrett. No, absolutely not.
Pretty good draft, pretty good group we got there. It was fun. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.